Chosen one. Watch how God defeats your haters. They looked at you and saw a target. They saw a quiet soul, an open heart, and mistook your kindness for weakness. You felt the cold draft of their whispers when you left the room. You felt the weight of their unspoken bets against you. Have you ever felt entirely surrounded by people waiting for you to fall? I want to hear your real story in the comments below, because this space is for honest conversations. It starts quietly, almost imperceptibly. A smirk here, a sideways glance there. The sudden silence when you walk into a crowded room. You didn't ask for this. You never went looking for a war. You just woke up every day, laced up your shoes, and tried to do the right thing. You tried to build something meaningful, to pour your soul into your work, your family, your life. But there is a strange phenomenon in this world. Light attracts things. It attracts warmth. It attracts moths. But it also casts shadows. And those shadows of eyes, they watched you. They saw your earnestness. They saw how deeply you cared. And for reasons you might never fully understand, it bothered them. Your light illuminated their lack. Your effort highlighted their stagnation. So they began to dig the trenches. It's a uniquely heavy kind of exhaustion, isn't it? The fatigue of knowing that people who barely know you are silently praying for your downfall. It's not a loud, chaotic noise. It's a low, persistent hum in the background of your life. You feel it when you share good news and the room goes stiff. You feel it when you stumble and you catch that fleeting glimmer of satisfaction in their eyes. They thought you wouldn't notice. They thought your gentle nature meant you were blind, but you saw everything. You felt every single microscopic shift in the room's energy. That's the curse of being perceptive. You see the daggers before they are even drawn. For a long time, you probably try to fix it. That's what people like you do. You thought, maybe if I shrink myself a little bit, maybe if I quiet down, maybe if I apologize for things I didn't even do, they will finally accept me. You folded yourself into smaller and smaller boxes. You dimmed your own headlights so you wouldn't blind them. You swallowed the unfair criticism. You let them take the credit. You smiled for the thinly veiled insults disguised as jokes. You broke your own back trying to carry the weight of their insecurities. And the devastating part? It didn't work. It never works. Appeasing people who are committed to misunderstanding you is like trying to fill a bucket that has no bottom. It just leaves you entirely empty. I know about those nights. The ones where the house is perfectly quiet, the world is asleep, and you are wide awake, staring at the ceiling, your mind racing, replaying conversations, analyzing every word, wondering what is fundamentally wrong with you that makes you a magnet for this kind of subtle cruelty. You felt the sting of betrayal from people you once called friends, people you broke bread with, people you defended when others spoke ill of them. When the storm came, they didn't just abandon you. They handed the wind its fury. They joined the chorus of doubters. It leaves a cold, hollow ache in your chest, a profound, isolating loneliness. You look out the window at the empty street and realize that you are standing entirely alone on a battlefield you never wanted to be on. They looked at your isolation and smiled. They mistook your solitude for defeat. They looked at your bleeding heart and concluded that you were finished. They calculated your worth based on their own limitations. They looked at the mountain in front of you and decided there was absolutely no way you could climb it, simply because they knew they never could. They wrote the end of your story. They sealed the envelope. They planned the funeral for your dreams. And why wouldn't they? From the outside, the odds were terrifyingly stacked against you. You were drained. You were exhausted. You were carrying emotional debts you didn't accrue. You were bleeding out from 1,000 invisible paper cuts. Every time you tried to stand up, another rumor surfaced. Another obstacle was deliberately placed in your path. Another door was slammed shut in your face by someone smiling warmly at you. It's a brutal, suffocating place to exist, to breathe air that feels thick with resentment, to walk on ground that feels rigged with traps. You started to believe them. That is the darkest part of the descent, not the hatred from others, but the moment that hatred seeps into your own mind and takes root. The moment their whispers become your own internal monologue. You looked in the mirror and saw the failure they described. You saw the weak, insignificant target they treated you as. You almost surrendered. You almost laid down the dirt and let them step right over you on their way to the top. They thought they had broken the very core of who you are. They thought they had buried you. They watched the dirt fall over your ambitions and congratulated each other on a job well done. They walked away, dusting off their hands, completely convinced that they had successfully snuffed out the threat you posed to their fragile egos. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the silence of a life stripped down to its bare, agonizing studs. Everything you thought you knew about loyalty, about fairness, about the basic goodness of people, was lying in pieces on the floor. You were left in the dark, cold, forgotten, written off as a cautionary tale of someone who reached too high and fell too hard. And in that crushing darkness, underneath the heavy soil of their judgments and their lies, you waited. They didn't know about the quiet architecture of the dark. They didn't understand what happens when you plunge a soul like yours into absolute obscurity. They assumed the darkness would consume you, because the darkness would have consumed them. But you are built differently. There's a profound, almost terrifying secret about the dark. It is not an empty space. It is a womb. It is the very place where the most magnificent transformations in the universe take place. Consider a seed violently shoved into the freezing, heavy earth. From the outside, it looks like a burial. The dirt is piled high. The sun is blocked out. The weight of the world is literally pressing down from every conceivable angle. If the seed had a voice, it might scream. It might believe this crushing pressure is the end of its existence. But deep within that tiny, fragile hull, an ancient programming awakens. The pressure doesn't destroy it. The pressure is the exact mechanism required to crack the shell. The soil they threw on you wasn't a grave. It was an incubator. When they stripped away your resources, your reputation, and your support system, they thought they were starving you. They didn't realize they were just removing the distractions. They were clearing the stage for a power they cannot even begin to comprehend. You see, when human hands let you go, something else catches you. Call it God. Call it the universe. Call it a profound, undeniable arc of justice that bends quietly in the background of our chaotic lives. Something ancient and infinitely powerful stepped into the room the moment your haters locked the door. While they were busy celebrating your demise, a divine recalibration was happening beneath the surface. You felt it, didn't you? In those quiet, agonizing hours when you had absolutely nothing left to lose, a strange, eerie peace began to settle over you. The anxiety of trying to please them burned away. The fear of their opinions dissolved into ash. Because what can they do to you when you have already hit the bottom? When you have already survived the absolute worst they could dish out? Nothing. That is the dangerous beauty of a person who has survived the fire. They no longer fear the flame. The shift happens silently. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or grand declarations. It is a slow, deliberate strengthening of a spine that has been bent for too long. It is a steadying of a breath that used to be frantic. You started to realize that their rejection was never a reflection of your worth. It was a terrifying mirror held up to their own unhealed wounds. Their hatred was just their own self-loathing, weaponized and pointed in your direction. They didn't underestimate you. They fundamentally miscalculated the source of your strength. They thought your power came from the things they could take away. They thought it came from your status, your relationships, or your standing in the eyes of crowd. They believed that if they dismantled your life, they would dismantle your spirit. But your power was never external. It was woven into your marrow. It was forged in the quiet resilience of your character. It was gifted to you by a source that they have no access to. Imagine an ocean. On the surface, there are storms. Waves crash. Winds howl. Ships are torn to splinters, and the water is violently chaotic. This is where your detractors live. They live on the surface, entirely dependent on the weather of circumstance, scrambling to stay afloat, pushing others under just to catch a breath. But drop down 1,000 fathoms. Drop down into the deep midnight blue of the abyss. Down there, the water is perfectly still. The pressure is immense enough to crush a submarine. Yet entire ecosystems thrive in absolute silence. Down there, the surface storms don't matter. The roaring wind doesn't penetrate. That is where you were pushed. They pushed you into the deep, thinking the pressure would crush your lungs. Instead, you grew gills. You adapted to the heavy water. You found a silent, unshakable grounding in the very depths they feared. While they exhausted themselves maintaining their facade on the surface, you were gathering mass in the dark. This is a divine strategy of the unseen. It uses the malice of your enemies as the very friction needed to sharpen your blade. Every rumor they spread, every trap they set, every door they locked. It was all just resistance training for a soul destined to carry heavy things. They thought they were the main characters in your tragedy. They didn't realize they were just a temporary friction in your origin story. They were the chisel, brutally striking the stone. They thought they were breaking the rock to pieces. They were completely unaware that the master sculptor was guiding their every strike, chipping away the excess to reveal the masterpiece underneath. God doesn't always stop the hammer from falling. Sometimes he just guides a blow, and now the stone is starting to take shape. The dust is settling in the quarry. The chisel has done its work. The very things they did to break you have inadvertently forged you into something unbreakable. You no longer seek their validation, because a wolf does not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. You no longer desperately try to explain your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. You have realized that silence is not just an absence of noise. It is an impenetrable fortress. They look over their shoulders now. They feel a strange chill in the air. The narrative they so carefully constructed is beginning to fray at the edges. The truth, buried alive, is starting to scratch at the lid of the coffin. They underestimated the sheer, terrifying patience of a righteous soul. They thought because you didn't seek revenge, you were defeated. They confused your grace for surrender. They didn't understand that you handed the battle over to a higher court. You walked away from the fighting ring not because you were beaten, but because you recognized that your enemies were entirely out of their weight class. You left them to the most brutal opponent of all. Time. Time is the great equalizer. It dismantles the liars and vindicates the authentic, while you quietly focus on rebuilding, on healing, on pouring love back into your own depleted soil. Time was busy auditing their ledgers. The universe is deeply, entirely reciprocal. The energy they spent trying to dig a pit for you is the exact pit they are now standing in. You didn't have to lift a single finger. You didn't have to plot a grand revenge or expose their secrets. You just had to survive. You just had to keep breathing in the dark, trusting that the roots you were growing would eventually break the surface. And they are breaking. The green shoots are finally pushing through the heavy earth. You can feel the warmth of the sun again, but it's different this time. You are different. The naive, desperate need to be loved by everyone has been burned away. In its place is a quiet, towering mountain of self-respect. You look back at the people who tried to dismantle you, and the strangest thing happens. You don't feel rage. You don't feel a burning desire to parade your victory in their faces. You don't even wish them harm. You don't spend your nights dreaming up scenarios where they are forced to apologize to you. You just feel a profound, quiet detachment. You see them now not as monsters, but as deeply flawed, painfully human actors in a play you have simply walked out of. They are still on that stage, rehearsing the same bitter lines, fighting the same exhausting battles, entirely trapped in the cages of their own making. But you are walking out of the theater and into the fresh air. This is what true, absolute victory looks like. It isn't loud. It isn't a parade with confetti and a scoreboard. It is the quiet, steady rhythm of your own breathing in a room where you finally feel safe. It is waking up on a Tuesday morning, making your coffee, and realizing that their names haven't crossed your mind in weeks. It is a profound realization that their poison has entirely left your bloodstream. God didn't just defeat your haters by crushing them. He defeated them by making them completely and utterly irrelevant to your future. He removed their access to your energy. He built a moat of peace around your life that their arrows simply cannot cross. They can fire them all day long, pulling the bowstrings back until their fingers bleed. But those arrows will only ever fall harmlessly into water. You are standing on solid rock now, the foundation you built in the dark. The character you forged when absolutely no one was clapping is holding you up. You are no longer easily shaken. You no longer flinch at sudden movements. You carry a quiet authority now, a gravity that shifts the atmosphere of every room you enter. People feel it. They don't know exactly what you've been through, but they sense the depth. They sense the heavy water you survived. You have become a sanctuary, because you know exactly what it feels like to be hunted. You now offer the safest harbor for others who are running from their own storms. Your pain wasn't pointless. It was a brutal tuition you paid for a profoundly deep, unshakable empathy. You are the chosen one not because you were a shiny crown, but because you carried the unbearable weight and survived. You walked through the deepest valley of the shadow, and you didn't set up camp there. You didn't lay down in the dirt. You kept walking, and now the valley is behind you. The road ahead is yours. It is quiet. It is beautiful. And most importantly, it is finally entirely yours. Putting together these stories takes hours of dedication. If this video brought you peace today, you can buy me a coffee using the Ko-Fi link in the description. Your voluntary support keeps this channel alive. Thank you for listening.